Talking with the experts.
Episode 370, LaKeisha Entsuah discusses with us why we should make well-being part of our business plan.
So I think the first step is to really be honest with yourself about the amount of time that you have. I think sometimes, especially as new entrepreneurs, I remember starting my business and I was like, you know what? I can get this thing off the ground up and running in 2 weeks. I'm not really sure why I thought I was going to do that because at the time my oldest child was just 6 months old. But in my head, there weren't that many steps and I wasn't taking into account. But I've had this infant that I also need to take care of. And so I was thinking to myself, oh, you absolutely can do this in 2 weeks. This is no problem, easy peasy. And then I started working on it. I was like, there's no way I'm actually going to be able to do this. And so, what I suggest people doing is looking at their schedule as it exists now and sitting down and writing down all of the things that you have to do and looking at it on paper. Because I think
Hello and welcome to Talking with the Experts. I'm your host, Rose Davidson from rosedavidson.com. Talking with the Experts is about all things business by business owners for business owners. You can find it on all good podcasting streaming platforms and on YouTube. Today, my guest is LaKeisha Entsuah. Hopefully, I've got that right. Now, LaKeisha is going to be discussing with us how to make our well-being part of our business plan. And LaKeisha is the founder of Chief Wellness Officer behind the Well Beauty Lab podcast and blog. After turning her career in pharmaceutical manufacturing into a plant-based beauty brand, she shifted her focus to wellness. LaKeisha has a desire to help women confidently create a lifestyle that fully supports their well-being. As a mother of three, my goodness, she doesn't look that old. She knows firsthand the challenges of finding balance between work, family, and self. Drawing from her own wellness journey, LaKeisha has set out to create a space where other women can discover their best self and help them thrive. She has touched the lives of many and plans to continue to spread her knowledge and passion to encourage others to live their happiest and healthiest lives. Welcome, LaKeisha, and thank you so much for being here today. I know it's probably very early for you for where you are.
Yes, thank you so much for having me, Rose. I'm so excited to be here.
So how did you go? Why did you sort of explained in your intro why you left the pharmaceutical industry, but what was the reasoning behind it other than you wanted to start your own business?
So it was kind of twofold. So I left the industry shortly before my youngest two children were born. So like you said, I'm the mother of three, but my two youngest are twins, and they were born. They were born in 2017. So I actually started my beauty brand in 2013 after my oldest was born, but it was kind of a side gig for a long time. And I continued to work. But just before my twins were born, I was like, I don't think I can do this anymore. I don't think I can have a day job, run this business, and take care of these three children. So as much as I loved working in the business and seeing the development of new medicine, I realized that full-time entrepreneurship was going to be the path for me. So that's really what made me leave completely.
Okay, so what is the beauty brand?
So the beauty brand was called Elements of Allele. It was really focused on simplicity. So on my journey to becoming a mother, I was diagnosed with polycystic ovarian syndrome. And so for those of you who don't know, it causes a myriad of symptoms, hormonal imbalances, being one of them, difficulties with your menstrual cycle. And for me, it caused difficulty getting pregnant. And so during that process, I struggled with my fertility. And in the process of trying to become pregnant, going through treatment, I started to do research and said, okay, well, what is it that I can do to try and give myself the best chances of getting pregnant? And so there were all of the common things: eat well, exercise, making sure your body is healthy, and things like that, trying to manage your stress, which I never understood why they tell women who are struggling with their fertility not to stress. I feel like it's an oxymoron, but we do the best that we can. But also, I also began to learn about a lot of the harmful chemicals that can be contained in our beauty products. And so if you live outside of the United States and under the direction of the EU and their governing bodies, the regulations are a lot more stringent than they are in the United States. The last time I checked, I think there were just a little over 100 banned substances in cosmetics in the United States versus the tens of thousands in Europe and beyond. And so we're dealing with a lot over here. They just kind of put anything on the shelves here, much to our dismay. And so I realized that a lot of the products that I was using on my body and in my home could in fact be making this process more difficult. And finding swaps for your cleaning products and things like that proved to be very easy. For my skin, not so much. I have very sensitive skin on top of everything else. And so finding what I needed was not the easiest thing. And so I began experimenting. I grew up with a grandmom who loved to cook, and she was a grandmom who, add a little bit of this and a little bit of that. It's like, well, how much? I don't know until it feels right. And so I kind of took the same approach with testing for skincare until I finally found things that I was like, okay, I think I can work with this. But my goal really was simplicity. So all of our products contain 7 ingredients or less, and they were all plant-based ingredients, because that way I at least knew from one batch to another what I was getting. And there's nothing wrong with synthetic ingredients. It's just sometimes you don't know. Sometimes they can kind of change the formulation, and that's their prerogative. And so to not have to keep up with that as well, I was like, we're just going to use some plants. And so that is when I created Elements of Allele, and I ran that all the way until the beginning of 2021. I ran that business. But the pandemic, that was a rough time for everyone, being home with my 3 children. My husband also works in the pharmaceutical industry, and for him, he was not able to stay home because we needed a vaccine, we needed treatments. And so he was still at work, which meant I was home with the kids by myself day in and day out. And also, with all of the social unrest and things that were going on, Black-owned businesses became very popular. And while I'm glad people began to discover us, trying to scale up production when nobody wants to leave their home, it is very difficult to do. And so I just became burnt out. It became too much to juggle, and we were not set up in order to be able to handle all of those pressures. And so and mid 2021, I was like, I can't do this anymore. And as much as it pained me, at first I said, well, I'm going to take a break. I'm just going to, hit pause, kind of scale back production and things like that, and try to get myself together. But the more that I took a break, I realized there's a bigger issue at here. I was seeing a lot of my friends who were in entrepreneurship also being burnt out and struggling. And I was like, we didn't plan for this. We didn't plan for this at all. And I think we might need to make some adjustments, particularly as women, because we were still trying to do our jobs. You go to work, but we were also homeschooling, and we were also cooking 3 meals a day. And we were also trying to entertain little people because they wanted to be outside with their friends again. And again, we just weren't prepared for it. And that's when I realized I needed to do something different. And so this was my different.
Wow. Well done to you. But
Thank
yeah, I
you.
understand the burnout. I mean, I started my podcast in 2020, just after lockdown started. And, I've been going since then. But I realized the same, that, business owners were having a real challenging time because they couldn't leave the house. And, what were they going to do? How could they, still continue to be profitable and scale their business at the same time? And
Right.
Yeah, so that's where the idea of the podcast came. So I can really get where you're coming from because, if you don't have the resources as an entrepreneur to, to scale when something unplanned happens, what are you going to do?
Right. Right.
Yeah. So why is it so important to make well-being part of our business plan?
So, what I learned through this process was that, as a business owner, we tend to plan for a lot of things. Some of us start with a business plan from the beginning, or at least some notes on a napkin or in a notebook, and we try to anticipate, changes in consumer behavior or changes in, product availability and all types of things. But never do we sit back and think about what this process is going to do to us physically, mentally, and emotionally. We understand that we have to put a lot of energy into our businesses, especially in the beginning. If unless you somehow walk in and you've like, I've got millions of dollars in investment and I could just hire a team out the door, that's not the case for 95% of business owners. We are starting from the ground up. A lot of us are bootstrapping and we're trying to do everything all by ourselves. And for some people, that even includes doing it while you have a day job because you still need to support yourself or your family. And so we don't always take into account the toll that that will take on us mentally and physically, and our sleep, our physical activity, our time for exercise, the quality of the food that we're going to eat. Those are the things that tend to take a back seat when we're saying, oh, but I've got to take one more meeting, or, I've got to spend just a few more hours on this design, or, I've got to, try this one more thing as we try to figure out how this timing is going to work and adjust our time management. The first things that to go are, I'm going to skip that hour at the gym today and I'm going to put that hour back into my business. Or if I just stay up for 30 more minutes, I can get this done. And I'll catch up on sleep on the weekend. And it becomes this vicious cycle. And so I feel like if we plan for it in the beginning, if we sit down when we're looking at, what we're going to sell and how we're going to sell it and who we're going to sell it to, we should also sit down and say, okay, but how am I going to take care of myself in this process? Is this a high stress area? Am I going to have to, deal with people a lot? If I don't already have a therapist, maybe I should get one. Is there a steep learning curve to this? Is this going to take a lot of physical work? Am I in a business that requires a lot of hands-on labor? How am I going to make sure that my body is recovering during this process? So I think as we look at exactly what it is that we're doing in our business, if we also account for how it is going to affect us personally, we will be much better set up for success.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of us, especially women, don't take into account the fact that they need to schedule some me personal time into their life. Because you're right.
Mhm.
Normally, a normal, I guess, or average. I don't know. It's probably not quite right the words to use, but normally you do have a day job. You do use your business as a side hustle. You've got family, you've got cooking and cleaning and all those other things that you need to do. Plus, you've got to try and still find time to be with family and friends. It's not an easy road, and planning in your self-care is vital. So what ways would you suggest that we can do this?
So I think the first step is to really be honest with yourself about the amount of time that you have. I think sometimes, especially as new entrepreneurs, I remember starting my business and I was like, you know what? I can get this thing off the ground up and running in 2 weeks. I'm not really sure why I thought I was going to do that because at the time my oldest child was just 6 months old. But in my head, there weren't that many steps and I wasn't taking into account. but I've had this infant that I also need to take care of. And so I was thinking to myself, oh, you absolutely can do this in 2 weeks. This is no problem, easy peasy. And then I started working on it. I was like, there's no way I'm actually going to be able to do this. And so what I suggest people doing is looking at their schedule as it exists now and sitting down and writing down all of the things that you have to do and looking at it on paper. Because I think when we try to keep things in our head, we're like, oh, yeah, I can squeeze it in between these things and I can do this. And, oh, I can type these emails while I'm on the soccer field. And, I can listen to this while I'm in the supermarket or whatever the case may be, while I'm folding laundry. I can take client calls, where we tend to multitask a lot and not really think about the amount of time it's going to take. So I think if we sit down and look at on paper what our schedule actually looks like, and then say, okay, how much free time do I actually have? It's really different when you're holding something in your head and you're looking at it in black and white. And when we look at it in black and white, I think we can take a better assessment about what's happening. And so being able to say, okay, how much free time do I actually have? How much time is this business going to take? Especially if you're starting off as a side hustle. Okay, where can I add these pockets? But before you add that in, make sure that there's adequate time for rest. So when I tell people to write down everything on their schedule, I literally include everything. I spend these 7.5 to 8 hours sleeping. I spend, 30 minutes here, and here for meals, or, an hour if I actually have to cook them. I spend this amount of time commuting. I spend this amount of time, all of the things, laundry, everything, put everything on paper, because then you'll realize you don't have as much free time as you think you do. But also you'll be able to see that you might need to move some things around. And so I know that the idea of spending more money before you start making money might seem crazy to some people. However, consider the things that you might outsource, and not just in your business. I think it's really easy for us to say, oh, I can, outsource graphic design. I can outsource email marketing. I can outsource social media. Can you outsource the laundry? Can you outsource dishes? Can you outsource groceries? Can you have another parent, carpool and pick up the kids a couple of days a week? Can you take public transportation maybe instead of driving, so you have time to listen or jot down notes or whatever the case may be? So start to look at the adjustments that you can make, and then before you pile on all of your business activities, make sure that you've allotted time for yourself, and not about adding time where you can multitask. Say, oh, well, I can listen to my book while I'm doing whatever, or I can listen to the podcast while I'm doing something else. No, that actual time that is just for you, where you lay on the couch and watch TV, or you hang out with friends. Build that time into your schedule, and then see what you have left. And understanding that there are going to be some trade-offs. In the beginning, I didn't spend as much time with my friends as I may have liked to. They had to take a back seat for a little while, because I had to make sure that my family time and my business time were all filled in first, and my me time. So building those things into your schedule, but using a visual schedule so that you can actually see it, and you can be very honest with yourself about what your limitations might be. So I think that is a crucial first step. And really think of it like your business plan, because if you're lacking sleep, if you are stressed out because you're trying to cram too much into a day, you are going to be way less effective at whatever it is that you're doing. Your zone of genius will be more like a mad scientist if you were trying to pile too much onto your plate.
Yeah, I totally agree. I love your system. I think it's a great system that we, write things down, because we don't factor in just the menial tasks like laundry and house cleaning and cleaning the toilet
Mhm.
and all those things, and you've got to factor in the time, that you are going to spend with your children and your spouse or your partner. So it is really
Mhm.
important to write it down. And I like the fact that it's writing it down makes it a visual plan, and people can actually see where their time's being spent, and they can, I love that. It's a terrific thing. I might do that myself. I hadn't
Thank
thought
you.
about
And it's
writing it
never
all
too
down.
late. So even if you've been in business for a long time, yeah.
LaKeisha, where can people find you if they'd like to learn more about you or buy some of your product?
So you can find me, the easiest way to find me is online at wellbeautylab.com. You can find all of our products. We have a wonderful sleep journal because for me, it all began with getting more sleep. It was really about, particularly because I went through a lot of this with very young children. So when the world shut down, my two youngest had just turned 2. And anyone with toddlers knows that their sleep sometimes can be a bit erratic and they've got lots of energy, and trying to keep them cooped up can be a really difficult task. But it started with sleep for me. And so we have a really great sleep journal for those of us who find themselves staying and burning the midnight oil. But you will also find a lot of resources. That method that I talked about in writing everything down, we actually have a step-by-step guide. It's a free guide on our website called Schedule Auditing 101 that can walk you through that process so that you can see what you are doing. But yeah, wellbeautylab.com, you can find all of the information that I shared with you and anything else you need to know about us. You can also find me on Instagram is the primary place at wellbeautylab. And then you can find me at l.entsuah. It's ENTSUAH.
Wonderful. I'm going to go and have a bit of a look at your thing and see if I can grab that list. That'd be great. I'd love it.
Yes.
LaKeisha, have you got any words of wisdom that you'd like to share, or something that you have coming up, a book or podcast or anything like that?
So I do have a podcast called the Legacy of Wellness Podcast. You can find that on our website too. However, words of wisdom, I would just say, give yourself grace and space. As business owners, we no one is harder on us than we are on ourselves. No one holds us to a higher standard than we hold ourselves. And I think sometimes that push to be great and to succeed is what can also get us into trouble. And so I like to remind people to give themselves grace and space to do things on your own terms and on your own time. And I think if we follow that you will end up exactly where you're supposed to be.
Love it. Love it, love it, love it. Thank you so much for sharing, and thank you for joining me today. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I love those tips. I think they're absolutely brilliant, and anyone that wants them needs to go to LaKeisha's website.
Thank you so much for having me, Rose.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Talking with the Experts, hosted by Rose Davidson. Make sure you have a look at our back catalogue over at talkingwiththeexperts.com. And be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss out on any episode. We look forward to your company next time. Talking with the Experts.